the essential question for this lesson: how do we graph lines using the x-intercept and the y-intercept? So before we were graphing with the table the last few days. Now we're going to graph using x-intercepts and y-intercepts. So we're going to start with a question, which kind of leads into why this works. So think about how many points minimum are needed to make a straight line. So you think about if you have just 1 point, through that 1 point you can do all sorts of different lines going through that 1 point. So if we look at 2 points and we draw a line through, there's only one line, one way we can get through those 2 points. So the minimum number of points needed to make a straight line is 2. I typically, when you're graphing, ask you for a few more to make sure that you're getting your line nice and straight throughout the graph. But we could use 2 points, like the x-intercept and the y-intercept, plot just those 2 points, and then we can get a line going through them. So let's take a look at some vocabulary and definitions. X-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, that's our x-intercept, the point. Okay, that's a key word here, point, where the graph crosses the x-axis. Therefore, when I ask you for an x-intercept, I expect you to write it in this format, x, 0, as an ordered pair, as a point. So make sure that you're writing it that way. Then we have the y-intercept. So just like with the x-intercept, the y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. Therefore, when I ask you to identify the y-intercept, you are going to identify it as an ordered pair, 0, y. So let's do an example where we're finding the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So the way you write those ordered pairs is what's going to help us in identifying and finding what those values are. So the x-intercept. Okay, remember when you looked at the ordered pair, it was x, 0. It's always of that format. Typically, x is going to be a number, but the y is always 0. Okay, so the y is 0 for the for all x-intercepts. So since y is equal to 0, we're going to plug 0 into our equation. Make sure you show me the case where you plug it in. Then 4 times 0 is 0. So if I simplify, I get 3x equal to 24. And then divide both sides by 3. So we get x is equal to 8. Don't forget, you have not yet given me what the x-intercept is. You must write it as an ordered pair. So that would be 8, 0. That is my x-intercept. The y-intercept works the same way. Okay, the only difference is, if you remember the ordered pair, it's 0, y. So in this case, the x is always 0 for the y-intercepts. So it's always the opposite variable that's always 0. So if I'm looking for the y-intercept, the x is 0. So I'm going to plug that into the equation. Again, always show me that you've plugged the 0 into the equation first. Then simplify. 3 times 0 is 0, so I just have negative 4y equal to 24. And then you divide both sides by negative 4. So y is equal to negative 6. Don't forget to give me the y-intercept. So that would be 0, negative 6. This is my y-intercept. Next example, we are now going to use that to graph this equation using the x and y intercepts. So you would start the same way we did on the previous example. Find the x-intercept, and you can abbreviate it INT. So x-intercept, what do we know about all x-intercepts? The y is equal to 0. So I'm going to plug that into my equation. 4x plus 8 times 0 equals 24. And then we're going to solve. So 4x equals 24. Divide by 4 on both sides. X is equal to 6. So my x-intercept is 6, 0. So that's the x-intercept. Y-intercept. What do we know about all y-intercepts? The x is equal to 0. So I'm going to plug that into my equation. 4 times 0 plus 8y equals 24. Simplify. So I get 8y equals 24. Divide both sides by 8. Y is equal to 3. So my ordered pair is 0, 3. That is the y-intercept. Now I have 2 points, 2 ordered pairs. I can come over to the graph and graph each of those points. So I have 6, 0, so 6 is the x value. That one goes sideways. The 0 is the y value. That's the up and down value. So I go to the right 6 and then up 0. So my point is going to go right there. So there's my point. Now we graph the other one, 0, 3. So remember 0 is the x. X is the sideways movement. Since it's 0, we're not going left or right. We're going to stay right in the center. And then the y value is 3. So positive 3 is up 3. Once you get the points, you must draw a line through those 2 points. Okay, you must go all the way through those 2 points. So I'll draw a line going through those 2 points. Make sure you have arrows on both ends because it does keep on going forever and ever. If you only connect the dots and you don't get the line going all the way through, you will lose points on that. You must have the line going all the way through with arrows on both ends because it does keep on going. We just use those 2 points to get the entire line. So you must draw in the entire line. So that's how you graph using x and y intercepts. Okay, example 3, we're going to identify the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts. So I just want to point out a couple of things, being careful with where you put your zeros. So we have this point, which is on the x-axis. So when you identify the x-intercept, you're going to do the x, remember it's always x comma y, the x value first, so that was -2, and then the y value, in this case, is 0. So make sure you get those numbers in the correct order. That point is -2, 0. Then the y-intercept, okay, is on the y-axis, so it's that point right there. And when you identify your x value, okay, you don't go anywhere, so the x value is 0. Then you go up 1, so the y value is 1. So your y-intercept is 0, 1. It is very important that you get those numbers in the correct order. 0, 1 is not the same thing as 1, 0. So you got to make sure you get your x and y variables in the correct order. Okay, be sure that at this time, at the end of your notes, you write the answer to this question. How do we graph lines using the x-intercept and the y-intercept? So you can list them as steps. First we do this, then we do that, until you're completely finished. Or you can write it in paragraph format, answering this question and going through the process as if you're explaining to someone else how you would graph using x-intercepts and y-intercepts. And we'll do some practice in class.